Hi, it's Dr. Parikh. Exciting. You have done some of the hardest parts of the paper. You're ready to work on revising your discussion section. The good news is it's very similar to what you've done before. The bad news is you kind of have to do it all over again. But I'll talk you through the changes here, and as you can see, there's a really detailed outline to help you. So the summary paragraph is the same idea, but you are going to have to update it because now you're not just talking about a thesis, you're talking about a hypothesis or research question. So you're going to have to do another topic sentence, and you will, the focus now needs to make sure that you need to make sure the focus is reflecting what you end up asking a question about. And then you're going to talk about your hypothesis, but just like remember back when you were reading your articles and I told you that the discussion, the first paragraph, was this super secret place to find a really straightforward, plain English description of what was going on in the article? Well, you now have to create that plain English, straightforward discussion of your article in your summary paragraph, so that when readers look at your paper, they have a kind of a cheat sheet to go to. And then you're going to give a little bit of context for your hypothesis, basically, why did I think it was important to do this study that I haven't actually done yet? This next paragraph I'm going to come back to, actually, because it is the newbie on the block. Limitations, it's the same basic idea, except now, instead of critiquing the rest of the literature, you will only critique your study. And this is the key for all of these sections. Now you're going to have to completely update them because you need to make sure everything fits for your study. And hopefully you designed your study to address some of the limitations that were in the past. So for example, if I'm critiquing the ADHD literature doesn't represent enough girls and my study has a lot of girls, I'm not going to critique that my study doesn't have girls, because it does. I'm going to look at something else to critique. As a reminder, this doesn't mean that your idea was bad, that your design was bad. It means that a study can't be everything to everyone. So think about who's being excluded. Think about whether the measure how good the measure you're using is. Things like that. Don't take it personally. Don't feel defensive. Just say what's lacking. How is my study limited? Meaning who's being left out? What isn't it doing? Even if it's not realistic for a study to do everything at once, it's just important to recognize. Professional applications, same rules as before. You're going to pick a professional, somebody typically who has like a special degree. Usually they're licensed professions like teaching or counseling, and saying how they can do their job different. Based on, this one might be a little closer because before you had to base it on your specific ideas or your specific things that you reviewed. So you might be able to salvage one of them, but be okay with just writing something new, saying, all right, if my finding holds up, and that's what's kind of tricky, is that first you have to say, like, if the hypothesis is supported. So you could say, if girls experience more benefit from bouncy balls than boys do, or whatever it was that your hypothesis was, or if girls and boys are different in their response to bouncy balls to sit on, then this professional, so name somebody specific, do not use the cop-out professionals. No. Name somebody, a teacher, a social worker, a nurse, somebody. Could, remember, don't use the word should, just say they could do this, and then say what they could do. Be specific, make it fit specifically for your study. So not just the literature anymore, but your specific study. And then future research, pick two of your limitations and say what future research can do to build on it. So basically, what could people do after your study to keep contributing to the literature? So those are the sections that you're already familiar with. Let's look at this big bad boy, the implications. So this doesn't get a heading, it just flows. So you have the heading discussion kind of in the middle of your page, and then you have your summary paragraph with no special heading, and then underneath it you have a new paragraph. That's what I'm calling your implications paragraph. It doesn't get a special heading either. It just goes straight down, And then you have a heading for limitations, and you start with the special headed paragraphs. Now, implications. This is where you discuss what your findings might mean. Now, this is tricky because you don't have findings. But you're still saying, how might you put it in context once you have it? And you're putting it in context of comparing and contrasting with other findings, but I also want you to put it in context of theory. How does this compare with the broad ideas about this topic? So I break it into kind of 3 steps, and each of those could be 1 to 3 sentences, depending on how much detail. If this paragraph gets really bulky, more than half a page or so, break it into 2 pages, just fine, or 2 paragraphs, and make sure that each one gets a little bit of a topic sentence. So first interpretation, you're going to do, if this group shows higher levels of this thing than the whatever the other group was. So if girls show a stronger response to bouncy balls than boys do, then it might mean that girls' symptoms are something that makes them benefit, or, that girls have a greater need for physical fidgeting. That's actually my best guess is that that's probably the opposite of what is found. If there is a difference between boys and girls and fidgeting and ADHD. But at any rate, you're going to, based on whatever literature you've just reviewed, you're going to say what it might mean. And you want to put it into kind of or again, you're still trying to keep that plain English feel as much as you can. You're not using names of specific measures. You're using broader terms. So another example that I have written here, if the women exhibit greater levels of PTSD than the men exhibit, then it might mean that women experience more trauma than men experience. And then I give another possible explanation. It might also mean that women are more likely to develop PTSD than men, even for the same traumatic experience. So I'm giving 2 possible explanations for what it might mean. I say it's often helpful to list more than 1 possible meaning. It'll certainly help. I might throw a little bonus your way if you do, but I'm requiring a minimum of 1 attempt to interpret what it might mean. Next up is what I call connection. This is where you're connecting it, just like in your reading roles, someone is the connector and is connecting ideas to each other, to outside experiences. Here you're connecting your hypothesis with findings that you've already reviewed in your introduction. So here you're going to use citations, you're going to be specific, and you're going to be comparing and contrasting. So it would confirm, it would contradict, it would extend the work, or it would explain the findings, it would add to the line of inquiry. There's a lot of different phrases you can use to talk about how you can connect one study to another. And if it's something that's in multiple studies, you can certainly cite multiple studies. That's great. So I want you to do that at least 1 sentence of connecting your hypothesis with what's been found. And this is another reason that I really wanted you to make a research question that's 1 logical step further than what someone else has done, using similar measures, because it lets you compare and contrast really easily. This last one is in many ways the one that's going to take the most time for you, because specific findings are specific. Theory is big and broad, but it's really important that you start thinking now about science as being this mixture of specific findings feeding into bigger theory, and then kind of generating more research questions to lead to specific findings to feed back into the general theory. This is a cycle, and we need to think about all parts of the cycle all the time to really be truly scientific. And so you need to think about how one specific outcome can not only fit with a series of past findings, but can also fit into some sort of rational explanation of the whole process. So what you need to do for this, what I would actually recommend is go back through and reread your articles. By now they should be well marked. You should have some keywords, topic sentences figured out. So you should be able to reread them fairly quickly and think about how you can pull a bigger picture idea. So looking at the theories that they're using, the way that they're discussing how this process works. So if something happens, like if women exhibit greater levels of PTSD than do men, this may be due to something bigger. So the first one you're just saying, so the first you're saying kind of what it might mean. It might mean that women experience more trauma than men experience. And again, these are all just made up findings. I'm just kind of giving you some examples. Just like yours is going to be made up, but realistic-ish. And then you compare it with previous findings. So you say it agrees with, it contrasts with, it explains something else. Maybe something else was kind of confusing, and so you'd say, well, this really explains why that happened. So first you're just saying what it might mean, sort of what might be going on. You say how it compares to what we already know, and then you say why it might be going on. It may be due to this underlying mechanism. So the theory, or the implications, and particularly the theory, is going to take you some time. It's going to make you go back through your articles. It's going to make you think a little bit, and it's going to push you, which is good. It's good to go deeper than you've ever gone, because that's how you grow. The rest of this section should be very straightforward, though. So what I would do, I would write the whole rest of the section and kind of let this in, and try not to leave implications for the last minute. Try to let your brain work on it a little bit. So, reread your articles, especially for the theory part, reread articles. Definitely reread your article notes, actually. You can probably find your connection pieces in your article notes if you took pretty good notes. But you want time for your brain to just work on it. Like, go for a walk, work on something else. Like, let your brain just process in the background for a little bit. And that takes time. So you got to work ahead. You got to balance things out. And as always, I'm available. It's you can't just email me and say, what theory should I use? Because I haven't read your articles, but you can meet with me. You can bring your articles with you, either in person or over an online meeting, and we can look through them together. I can help you look and find things, but I can't just make it appear for you. But again, I love meeting with students. I love talking about research and theory, so you're welcome to drop in if you are stumped. Have spent a little, I would say finish up the whole rest of your discussion section and bring in just the part, the whole thing, and we'll work on the parts that are confusing. Make sure you bring in your original articles, though. I can't do anything without your articles. All right, thanks. Bye.